Yo, what's up? Lad here. How's it going? So you pulled a Kaine. Now it's time to find out her true potential. This video will more so be for newer players, but we'll go over her best weapons and accessories, optimal team building, and the basics of increasing her damage through buffs and debuffs. Let's go ahead and get it. Quick disclaimer for weapons, this is the endgame or the latest content for the global side of COTC for myself. To those that are just beginning the game, use whatever the next available weapon is depending on where you are in the game. Now, like most DPS in this game, inside Orstera, fortune weapons are still the best weapons to use for multi-hitting attacks. However, because Kaine hits the damage cap without much effort, you may want to try using Stalwart weapons or Brilliant weapons. Recall that these weapons can give you another 100k damage limit up. Inside Celestia, build whatever Uma weapon you can on her. For accessories, she again wants something that increases her damage limit and attack. Bargella's A4 accessory or Cuffs of the Family is fantastic to put on her, as it's a 100 to attack and 100k to damage cap up. Nextly is the free level 120 accessory, that's a flat 200 attack up and another 100k damage up. Lastly, for her last lot, this depends on what you have. For her, in my sample battle later, I have her A4 accessory to help out capping out her passive physical attack up and also getting her ultimate gauge up to 100%. Next, let's go over team building. I'm going to have travelers that you might not have, and that's perfectly fine. Play this game at your own pace. Firstly, before building any team, you want to always bring a healer, a buffer, a debuffer, and a support. Once this has been satisfied, you can then start thinking about building passive attack and passive damage up to the cap 30% to Kaine. Now this is a hybrid carry team with Kaine, so we'll be focusing on trying to cap her passive attack to 50%, because recall that her third passive increases her physical attack cap from a 30% to 50%. Nextly, you want to equip accessories or bring in other travelers to satisfy her dagger damage up to 30%. Then you want to focus on also being able to passively cap out 30% of debuffs onto your enemies. This is the more difficult aspect that many individuals may not be able to provide, seeing as they're locked behind newer travelers or A4 accessories. Next, you want to bring travelers that can now provide active buffs and active debuffs, along with their ultimates to either buffing or debuffing. For keepers, you want to have both Chomper and Meovilus, as these apply the most amount of damage to your character. For newer players, you can get the keepers once you start the Ember Flame story. In this game, there are 6 separate categories of allowing you to deal more damage. Each of these categories are capped at 30% separately and all stack. Starting with the first one, active buffs and debuffs. Active buffs are shown in battle when your allies cast a skill. Active physical attack buff, such as Lynette's buffs to physical attack. Active damage attack buff, such as Richard's buff to sword damage. Then, next, we have active debuffs. Active physical defense debuffs, such as Viola's physical defense down skill. Then active weapon resist down debuff, such as Bargella's dagger resist down skill. Moving away from the active buffs and debuffs, we now have passive buffs and debuffs found in characters' passive skills and equipments. Passive buffs and debuffs are marked with a white rectangular box when viewed in battle. Passive physical attack buff, such as Kaine's first passive, which gives her a 15% attack up. Passive damage attack buff, such as Ritu's A4 accessory, which gives her a 15% dagger damage up. Likewise with buffs, we also have passive debuffs. Passive physical defense debuff, such as Billy's third passive, when he breaks the enemy, it inflicts a 5% passive defense down. The passive damage debuff, such as Joshua's A4 accessory, which gives the enemy a 20% sword resist down on break. Then we have ultimate buffs. Physical attack ultimate buffs, such as Lynette's ultimate ability. Weapon damage ultimate buff, such as Richard's ultimate ability. Likewise, we have ultimate debuffs. Physical defense ultimate debuff, such as Billy's ultimate ability. Dagger resist debuff ultimate, such as from Sonia's ultimate ability. Finally, for the 6th category, we have keepers. These have their own category and stacks with everything else. The 2 most notable ones that are most useful are Chomper for its 30% damage up and Meovilus for its 20% physical attack up. So these are the 6 categories that you want to get to 30% each to maximize your damage, except for keepers, as they're all we have. With that, let's go ahead and start building. Starting with a sample free-to-play team against daggers, note that my team consists only of travelers found in the general pool, and then my Kaine is at A4. For this setup, she has her A4 accessory off. She was given Ritu's A4 accessory, which gives her 15% dagger damage up, and a Kota's right glove, which is the 3 turn at the beginning of battle, a passive 30% attack up. She has no weapons equipped for this showcase. She also has the level 120 accessory, which gives her a 200 attack up, and for this showcase, she has no weapons equipped. These are all free accessories that you can get in the game. Behind Kaine is Lucetta. You can also use Mabel as well too, as both their passive allows for Kaine to get additional 1 turn of buff from anyone. Note that any buff that says that cannot be extended will not get extended, like Kaine's Hoot and Holler from her ultimate. This will be one of the best combos as we move forward and other DPS travelers come out. The reason being that Lucetta, or Mabel being behind your main DPS, gives keepers an additional 1 turn of buffs. So this means if you're using Meowless, you have an additional 20% damage attack up and a 30% damage up from Chomper in 1 turn. You'll see later on when we get into battle for the showcase. With Lucetta, you want to give her 4-star accessories that help out Kaine's dagger damage, such as the White Wolf's emblem from class. This gives the front ally a 10% dagger damage up. Kaine's very own passive does not give her any sort of damage up, so you need to supplement that. She is now at 25% out of 30% passive dagger damage up with Ritu's A4 accessory and Class's A4 accessory. I gave Lucetta the Pear White Apron from Shelby, giving Kaine a 50% resistance to most status ailments. And then finally, the Orphanage postcard from Madeline, which gives the front ally, or Kaine, a additional 10% attack up. With this, she is now capped at a 50% passive attack up, as she herself has a 15% attack up from her own passive. Kota's right hand gives her 30%, and the last 10% is from Lucetta's accessory. Next we have Falco. For his passive, which gives the front row a 15% dagger attack up when he's at full HP, and also he can debuff defense. This now gives Kaine a 30% passive dagger damage attack up, which is capped, and behind him we have EX Primrose for her active buffing abilities and for her ultimate buff, along with being our HP regen or healer. EX Haunted is in the 3rd row for her debuff abilities, and Sarisa is behind her for breaking. Lastly, we have our 3-star thief, Billy, for his ultimate debuffs, and then Lynette behind him for her buffing abilities to active and passive, and her ultimate, which is another buffing ability. You want to equip her always with a Brave Fan, or once you get to endgame, a Cosmic Fan to increase her passive buffs by 1 turn when she switches row. With anyone equipping Kota's right hand, you definitely want to be switching Lynette back and forth for her passive to proc to keep up the passive buffs on your DPS. Now with that, let's head over to the battle portion. Our training dummy is the Mysterious Assassin rank EX1. I'll be putting up the active buffs and debuffs during this battle so that you can follow along.